So in this video, we got quite a bit in the way of Fallout 76 news to go over. Some interesting things, to say the least, do happen with the game and the public test server. We have a more concrete release window for the next big update, that bringing the Brotherhood of Steel content. We have a new Halloween event live right now, as well as a look at some of the balance changes coming to the game in the future. There's actually quite a few that will drastically impact some of you. If you guys want to stay up to date with Fallout 76, or really just get some more in-depth or full coverage of the Brotherhood of Steel update, you can leave a like or get subscribed. It's the best way to support this video with the YouTube algorithm. But otherwise, let's first touch on Steel Dawn. Bethesda just recently posted up this trailer of the new Brotherhood of Steel update coming on the horizon. I've actually been getting quite a few requests to break down this trailer, but honestly, there's not really much to break down. If you missed it, just recently I actually made a spoiler-free first impressions video, playing all of the content on the public test server early, and just kind of giving an overview and my initial impressions without ruining any of the content for you. So the trailer is pretty cool. The cover art of it, which has been released as a wallpaper, is actually very Star Wars-esque. Otherwise, when it comes to Steel Dawn, there really aren't that many surprises around the corner anymore. Between data mines and the actual content being live on the public test server, most of this stuff is pretty well known now. One of the things that we still don't know though is actually when exactly this is releasing. It's likely it's some Tuesday in December. From the trailer, it is listed as a December release date, but just recently we actually heard how Season 2 for Fallout 76 would be continuing into mid-December. I know although this technically doesn't mean that the next patch is coming out later than that, it probably does mean so. Season release dates tend to correspond with the big updates. So Season 2 will end right around when Season 3 starts and the next patch does release, or at least that's how it's worked thus far. So as far as when you can expect to experience this new Brotherhood of Steel content, I would say mid-December is the pretty likely date. And if anything, in the past, seasons have actually had a gap in between them. So Season 1 ended and then we had a bit of time until Season 2 started. So if anything, perhaps even towards the latter half of December is when we could expect this one. Now again, that is somewhat speculation. All we know right now is December overall, but I would not expect it in the first week based on these more updated guidelines. And here I was hoping Bethesda would release it in late November before Cyberpunk and make all our lives a lot easier as far as choosing what we want to play. Nonetheless, one of the other things to recently go live in Fallout 76 is the holiday event. We heard about the holiday event quite a while ago, some of the developers mentioning how they wanted to do last year's holiday event, but it had some bugginess, so instead they were opting for a new one. And the new cool holiday event is Fosnot. Yeah, it's actually kind of anticlimactic. Fosnot's a cool and fun event, but it isn't really in the Halloween spirit, like whatsoever. Okay, yeah, sure, some of the robots do wear masks, but there's no spooky, scary vibe at all. And I feel like there's a lot of cool stuff Bethesda could have done with the spooky, scary in Fallout 76. The event is live in-game right now, and it will be going on for the weekend. It is identical to what we had earlier this year, including the rewards, except one change. So earlier this year, when Fosnot was running, if you completed it with all the robots alive, which was the vast majority of the time, you would be awarded a random 1 to 3 star legendary. It was actually using the same list as the mystery pick at the purveyor. So it could be an armor, a weapon. It was all around a pretty cool reward. I think a lot of people are happy with this just getting deposited into your inventory, not having to loot it off of an enemy. It was actually one of the big praises of Fosnot 2020, except that's gone, at least somewhat. So it was changed to now being a 15% chance to get a 1-star legendary. That is regardless of keeping robots alive. If you keep 1 alive or if you keep 5 alive, you'll still have a 15% chance at a 1-star legendary, which is actually kind of a big downer. It was a bit of a downer that Fosnot was the Halloween event, but then for the only change to be that the legendary reward is actually kind of just worse all around. For the vast majority of builds, a 1-star legendary would always be a downgrade because people tend to have at least 2-star weapons that are pretty good. And even more mysterious with this, Bethesda has been describing this as a bug, but this was actually data mined and known about a while ago. It's not like there's some weird interaction causing or forcing something to be a 1-star. The value was manually changed. So calling it a bug does feel a bit disingenuous when this clearly was done intentionally at some point. This being very similar to when the Scorch Beast Queen couldn't be crippled. They said that was a bug, but they actually added a perk to the Scorch Beast Queen, making it so she couldn't be crippled. So I guess you could kind of call it a bug, but it really wasn't a bug. Someone manually did that. Complaining aside, as reparation for this, Bethesda is giving us double experience as well as a purveyor sale this weekend. So you could enjoy not only Fosnot, but those other 2 rewards also. And if all that isn't enough to get you in the Halloween spirit, there's also a ton of other cosmetics available, some for sale and some via Fallout First in a Halloween theme. And pricing aside, a lot of these are actually pretty cool. Bethesda definitely did a much better job with the Atomic Shop and Halloween items this year compared to last year. One of the other pretty big issues that is still happening in game is workbench lag. So if you hover over items in the workbench, it'll just lag your game endlessly. You could literally see my FPS in the top left corner. And actually, this is filmed on the PTS. This still has yet to be fixed. Hopefully it'll be fixed by the next patch, which seemingly now we do have a full month before that, so we got some time. But that's not to say we haven't seen changes or updates on the PTS. There's a couple of things that were actually changed or overhauled are pretty nice. There's an issue where if you're using a recording program or kind of an overlay program with Fallout 76, like OBS or even something like Shadowplay, it would cause the game to crash. This was actually addressed and now seems to work again properly, at least in my testing. And actually, what may be a great example of the PTS in action, daily ops and some of the rewards got another really big change. So as I'm sure many of you have already seen, there are new weapons and armors coming with Steel Dawn. These being Brotherhood themed, and the way you're going to earn these is by completing daily ops. So as you complete daily ops, you'll earn the plan to craft these, but you can't actually craft a legendary version. So to find them, you're just going to have it either drop from the purveyor or from a random legendary enemy. There's no guaranteed way to get a legendary drop. You just kind of have to roll the dice consistently. So all of that is frustrating because one, you're going to have to consistently do daily ops and you could only earn rare rewards once per day to even have a chance at getting one of these plans. But then even further, the whole process of killing legendary enemies or doing purveyor rolls to actually get the item and then the chance of it actually being a good roll. Fortunately, Bethesda did make this slightly easier, as the change that was just implemented is now after you actually learn one of the plans for these items, the plan will no longer be able to be dropped during daily ops. This really only applying to the rare plans, but this is nice because it means it'll increase the likelihood of you getting something new. Let's say there's a list of 10 items, so if you actually earn a rare reward, it'll be a 10% chance of it being any of them, but now let's say you earn 2 of them, you'll actually have a higher percent chance to get one of the other new ones if you get a rare reward. It's kind of a minor buff, but at least it is somewhat of a step in the right direction and will make the overall process just a lot less frustrating. There's some unlucky people out there that definitely would have gotten like the same weapon 4 times in a row, and the plans aren't tradable, so you could literally do nothing with them. One of the other big changes to the game though is some more balance or damage changes, and it's still not really in the right direction. So one of the things to recently get addressed or go live on the public test server is a elemental damage overhaul. Elemental damage is one of these things Bethesda seemed to have the idea for in Fallout 4. So instead of just ballistic and energy, you actually had concrete, cryo, fire, and poison damage types, but they never really took advantage of them, and they've just been kind of lingering in the files until some implementations of these started going live with Wastelanders. But this was kind of a fake implementation in that most weapons still heavily relied on energy damage, not their elemental damage counterpart like fire damage. Well, the big change is most weapons that would use fire damage will now actually only deal fire damage, and all the enemies in the game have been appropriately buffed to accommodate for that. So technically at some point in the past, many enemies had their resistances overhauled. So on the live servers you could see they have fire, poison, cryo resistance, but only now did many weapons actually start dealing damage that would affect those resistances, not just energy. Like for example, a flamer, instead of dealing energy damage, will now deal fire damage, which of course is going to bring that fire resistance into play, not just the energy resistance. But also this wasn't just a straight conversion. For several of these weapons, their damage was changed, but also slightly lowered. Such as flamers deal less fire damage than they were previously dealing as far as raw energy damage. And as far as weapons affected, I haven't seen a comprehensive list, but of course things like the flamer, the cryolator, as well as many grenades and even explosive mods. So if you're using a mod that is listed as a flame mod, it'll probably now deal fire damage, not energy damage. And this is interesting in that it makes encountering certain types of enemies a bit more dynamic, as some enemies have higher resistances on one thing and then lower resistances on another thing. Super mutants definitely being one of the toughest. They seem to have across the board just high resistance and kind of being tough to take down. So now initially when this went live, they actually had an error in that certain mods were not applying bonus damage. So I had a video like this where my flamer was dealing next to nothing. Now that has been fixed and my flamer does have more damage than it did then, but less damage than it does on the live server. So overall, what I would describe this one as is a slight nerf to certain energy weapons that are now going to use elemental damage instead. Take for example, the flamer I'm I'm using here. It still can clear out most enemies pretty quickly, but having spent so many hours using this flamer on live servers, you could definitely tell it's killing things just a bit slower most of the time. And it seems like for the vast majority of people using weapons that will be affected by this balance pass, you'll feel a similar result. It's not game breaking, it's not like this weapon is trash like it was before they did the most recent fix, but it's definitely not a buff either, and it does feel like a slight nerf overall, which in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now, technically having certain instances where switching to a different weapon could be a bit more powerful is kind of interesting, but it does come at a point where we've already had several nerfs to weapons and damage overall in Fallout 76. I would say we are long overdue for a buff, so having another nerf come is just putting salt in the already open wound. More testing is definitely needed to be done to see the actual impacts of this, and even further, this update is still a month and a half out, so we don't know exactly how this will impact things on release, but I wouldn't be shocked if several of you now will actually notice slight damage differences, or maybe even in some cases more extreme damage differences depending on what weapon you're using, and even more importantly, depending on which enemy you're facing, because some enemies now have drastically changed damage resistance types. One of the other big things coming with the next update outside of what I've talked about thus far is shelters. Even though now the public test server has seen 2 additional updates since shelters were added, and even just recently we got a developer deep dive into them playing and talking about shelters and the development behind them. I'll have that video linked down below if you want to check it out. They still have some weird or kind of arbitrary restrictions. Right now in your shelters you cannot have allies, displays, crops, water, or player vending machines. Player vending machines and even allies to a degree I kind of get. You don't want to have someone going through 2 load screens to get to a player vendor, but then crops, water, and even displays makes absolutely no sense to me. Displays in particular tend to be one of the costlier items at a camp, and a lot of people are looking forward to using shelters as an alternative to display things. At least thus far, we've seen no real responses around this, no intention to actually add these to shelters buildable items. And considering it's already been several weeks, approaching a month, I wouldn't hold my breath that they're going to get added. Fortunately, on the flip side, something else that was kind of a weird observation or issue on release was that shelters were distinctively vault themed, and despite that, there aren't many vault themed buildable objects in Fallout 76. Fortunately, these are coming. It seems like many of these objects will be awardable via the quest to actually unlock shelters. So for free, you'll be able to build these in your shelters from day one just after doing the quest to even unlock them. And even some more may be coming in the Atomic Shop in the future. That definitely is nice. We're getting a free vault themed building pack for the vault themed shelters when they come out. But then the final big thing expect to go live with this update is Season 3. And some new rewards for Season 3 and Score have been data mined also. First off, this heavy vault door that just looks awesome and actually has a really cool animation to go along with it. A new item known as Perfect Bubblegum that completely regenerates your hunger and thirst. That's a pretty cool one, but an interesting change to keep in mind as with this update, hunger and thirst being nerfs actually go away. So right now on the public test server, if you neglect your hunger and thirst and they go to 0, you have no debuffs to your character. But if you fill them up, you'll have buffs to your character. You can actually unlock perk coins via Season 3, which will be a pretty nice one for those of us trying to do the legendary perk card grind. A pretty interesting but sad one is the Presidential Gauss Rifle is listed as Season 3. That of course being around a cut quest, or what was hopefully not going to be a cut quest, but now definitely seems like a cut quest with the presidential race. The Vertigard Power Armor that was data mined ages ago is going to be the final season reward for Season 3. But even further, we've seen references to Season 4 and Season 5 in the files of the game, and these are relatively new, so it definitely looks like the season system is continuing. It seems to have been a success thus far. It's not like it's going away after Season 3, even though technically that's all we have confirmed on the roadmap. As far as Atomic Shop items, there's actually going to be many new flares coming to this game, this being another new feature where you could attach little things to your backpacks that will jingle around as you run with them. Definitely seems like a new avenue for monetization of Fallout 76, but of course keeping it cosmetic at the very least.